Hello and welcome to Backstage with Gig Performer. My name is Brett Pontecorvo. We're here on Thursdays, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'm super excited today because we have a very special episode. If you've been around for a while, you may have noticed we are in the midst of revealing some features of an upcoming release. No specific date yet, but if you're watching right now, you've been following along, can you go ahead and let us know in the chat what feature are you most excited for so far? I know we've been sharing a lot of stuff. By the way, I'll make sure after the stream is over to add a link in the bottom. We have a playlist now of all of the new features that we are about to release. So if you haven't checked those out yet, you want to know what's coming, you can go ahead and check out our playlist and see them all in one place. But yeah, let us know in the comments, what are you most excited about? It's very hard for me to pick one feature that I'm most excited about, but we'll go from there. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about our guest today. So super excited to welcome on this week special guest Matteo Cifelli. Matteo is a producer / engineer who also does live sound. That's his self-declaration, but this guy's the real deal. If you go on the description even right now, check out his website and just look at the people that he's worked with, and not just the names that he's worked with, right? Because names are just names, but look at the span of time at which he's been practicing. This guy is seasoned. He's a veteran. Also unbelievably generous, super, super kind. And we're really excited to have him on today. Before I bring him on, I do want to mention that Matteo, in addition to doing live sound, is also managing FOMO Studios in London, which is an amazing recording studio. Look at these spaces. I mean, this is like pristine stuff. So if you guys are in London and you're looking for recording accommodations, Matteo's serious recording engineer, producer, great mind with lots of experience. So you're definitely going to want to check out his website. This is also linked in the description, so make sure you check out what he's doing. But today we're going to have him come on and talk about all things live sound, gig performer, thinking through how to become, the best version of your artistic self. And I'm excited about it. This is going to be a really fantastic episode. So welcome to Backstage with Gig Performer, Matteo. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. So for people who maybe are unfamiliar, I know I kind of did a brief overview, but you deal with all things sound, whether it's in a live context or a studio context. Like, how do you describe your job to people when they ask, what do you do for a living? Like, what's your answer?
Well, I'm a sound engineer, basically. So,
Yeah.
and I'm a sound engineer, and I do everything about sound, and I like to do everything.
Yeah.
Am I specialize in something specifically? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But I've since I moved to England for now 15 years ago,
Wow.
the live thing, mixing shows in England has worked very well for me. While before, when I was in Italy, I was more actively working in the studio. So the only thing I will say is happening every day is I find myself in front of a console, mixing console.
Yes. Something to be said for getting in front of something every day and working with it. It keeps you sharp and fresh. All right, so when we first were meeting, we were kind of chatting through like how you ended up doing what you do. And it's a fascinating story. I guess I'm sort of like giving some of this away, but like you did a lot of grunt work to like become where you are now. Like, what was your process? Like, audio gig number one, Matteo is 16, or I don't remember how old you said you were. Like, where did you start and how did that all happen?
That was, I think when I started working, I was still 16, 17 years old. I was doing the last year of school,
Mm-hmm.
and I was obviously more interested in working at night in this club in Milan.
Nice.
And remember, I was being paid 30,000 lira lire per day, per
Right.
night,
Mm-hmm.
which was really nothing at the time.
Yeah.
Even 30,000 seems like a big number. But it was a great experience. I remember my first day of work, I found myself in front of it was a 16 channel mixer, and I could barely operate it. But I managed to do the first show, and the day after they called me again and again and again and again. When you grow up in a country like in Italy, you are is like you are at war when you work. You're at war. You need to reinvent yourself many times,
Interesting.
and you need to solve many problems all the time because the working environment is never the best. And
So,
that I really have done. I was very passionate about audio and music because of my father. He was an hi-fi expert, but the step into pro audio was like a natural thing, and it happened just by experience. So everything I've done hasn't been because of I was educated in this field, but just because I had the passion for music and for sound.
yeah. What kind of stuff were you mixing in Milan at that point? Like, was it like dance music or like what was coming out of the speakers?
It, you know, I was in Italy, so the music wasn't probably the best. But the quality of Italian musicians has always been very good, I will say.
Yeah.
And at the time, I went straight working into this. It was one of the main studios at the time, Psycho Studios,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I was very lucky because there were a couple of very good big bands produced by the owner of the studio at the time. So I was lucky to find myself in a very vibrant environment where we were doing top jobs for the country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not much international work that started to happen after
Mm-hmm.
in the mid '90s. Um, I was doing more studio work for another studio called Logic, but then I started freelancing, and after that the whole thing has changed completely because I was partnering with production teams, so my work was more like producing and
Mm-hmm.
mixing more than recording, which has never been my thing, recording, I must say.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to mix since day one. And that's I'm more interested in the mixing process. It's something that is like a fight between you and the song, and to make it as good as you can. uh, I wasn't very interested in the recording process. I always found it slow and politically complicated,
Mm-hmm.
while the mixing process for me is the best. You are mostly by yourself, and you deal well, lately you are absolutely by yourself because 10, 15 years ago you were mixing with the producer, arranger. Now it's just when you get a mixing job, it's just you and the computer
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
files sent over.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's my story. And the live has always happened because for some reason, when I was doing a record, uh, I always got the proposal to go on tour with the artist. And that's how I started mixing shows as well, doing front of
Mm-hmm.
house. That was really the reason,
Mm-hmm.
and not because I was actively looking for live gigs.
Interesting.
Um,
So,
that's really
uh, I have so many questions from everything that you just shared. My mind is kind of exploding right now, just getting more detail than the first time we talked. So, I'm going to try not to forget them all, but like what is it that you learned before you left your first job? Like just like foundational, like nothing, you're behind the board, you can barely work it. Like when you transitioned out of that to start working with you were recording a big band, like at that point, like what skills had you developed that let you even be able to do that? Like what did you learn from
studio work. I mean, when I started doing studio work, it was we were still working with 24 tracks. It was the beginning of the first digital multi-track, like the Prodigy machines, 32 track on 1-inch tape. Prodigy, I think, was the standard call,
Okay.
or the Sony 48. But you still were dealing with big desks. In fact, the first desk I worked on was an SSL. That was the standard in any studio at the time.
Mm-hmm.
While now, you won't see, you can barely see one in any studio. And so it was normal to work on big desk, tape machines. There were no computers at the time. It was the beginning of MIDI, the first drum machine, programmable drum machine. Yeah, and the first MIDI computer programs were coming up. So it was a completely different experience from today. You
Mm-hmm.
had to deal with people. It was in the studio. You had the band, you had the producer, you had the manager, and the engineer is always in the middle. He's always there in the middle. And you need to deal with everyone because um, that's your job. You are recording, you're mixing, but you are accommodating everyone. You are
Mm-hmm.
the interface between the music, the musician, and the tape
Mm-hmm.
where the audio goes. And you learn social skills a lot, uh, more than technical. I know many incredible engineers, which are, before being great engineers, are excellent communicators. Um, and that's what they do. They are able to create a good atmosphere in the studio, and that's how they may manage to make great records. Keeping people happy, um, and showing the right way musically.
It's fascinating. We chatted with Peter Clayus, who I heard about Gig Performer from you. And when I was talking to him, he was saying something so similar, where he was like, it's all about how you're dealing with people. It's all about the people. Which is just wild to hear, like two just high level like pros say, no, it's the social skills that you're learning. It's very, very fascinating.
It
Um,
is.
so I'm assuming, the live sound thing started because bands were asking you to come on stage. You had like mixed their albums, produced their albums, and now they're like, come with us. Did you feel like a connection to them? Was it like when they asked you to go, were you like, wow, I really want to go support these people? Was it like a curiosity thing for you? Like, what made you say yes?
Well, touring. If you tour as a front of house engineer for an act, um, I would say it's an easier job than uh, than being in the studio, because
Interesting.
you have the travel, and then at the end of the day, you work a few hours. You work a few hours where you have a lot of pressure, but most of the day is you do something else. So it's not physically stressful as
Mm,
the studio. The studio can really consume you, if the word is correct, because you can be in a month in a room with the same people for 10, 12 hours a day, and it's difficult. It can be difficult.
yeah.
While in live sound, this part is not so bad. So you have more time for yourself, and everyone is focused on the show, and in those 2 hours you have to give the best and make sure the show goes in the right direction. So that's, and I have always, in technically speaking, the mixing is mixing. So it doesn't matter if you are in front of a pair of an S10, or if you have a massive PA in a stadium. It's all, you need to deliver. You need to deliver. There
Mm,
are technical differences, but what I have always done, I have always tried to translate my studio experience, and my mastering experience as well, because a lot of my live technique are also about mastering into a live show, and that, I think, has always made a big difference when I mix a show, compared to other engineers which maybe don't have a strong studio experience. They will work in a very different way from the way I work,
Interesting.
with different results.
Interesting. So, what would you say then? Like, you've been doing this for a long time. Like, how is it that you are managing to like continue being like on the cutting edge? Like, how do you stay sharp at this point? Is it like, is there some like development that you're doing? Like, are you researching? Like, what is like your process for remaining at the top? Like the,
I I stick to the 5-6 essential piece of hardware or software that I know,
mm-hmm,
that I know that they are essential for me, and they
mm-hmm,
generally stay the same.
mm-hmm,
But at the same time, if there is something new on the market, which in these days is just software, because
mm-hmm,
hardware wise everything has been done, and if you see a new stereo compressor, is just another compressor which has been redesigned, changing the stack. The hardware is always the same thing. It's a
mm-hmm,
continuous recycling. But pieces like an 1176, is a piece of art. That compressor is makes a sound.
it
Or
does. Yeah.
in terms of EQ, I find digital EQ so much superior to the analog EQ.
Mm,
And there are plugins like the F6 from Waves, which are incredibly powerful piece of software that gives you the possibility of shaping the sound in any way. You
mm-hmm,
you can really fix any problem or boost the beauty of any sound with certain plugins. And development, I love technology, so anything new that comes on the market, I tend to try it.
mm-hmm,
I want to try it and see, if it makes a difference.
mm-hmm.
And if it does, I will start using it. That's what happened with Gig Performer. It was my endless research for a program that was running plugins in a live environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I in the 90s, I used to own this hardware unit which was called Plugzilla, and then there was the Muse receptor.
Mm-hmm.
It was early days. They were not working. These things were not working. But at the time, they were the only solution. I found myself running a Pro Tools TDM rig
Yep.
to run plugins. That was quite recent because it was with Mike and the Mechanics. So it was, well, it's not recent anymore, but it was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And to show you how desperate I was to find a program that was working. I literally have tried everything on the existing, and
And what were you trying to get? Like, why was the impetus? Like I want to run a VST as opposed to I want to run what's built into the board. Like, why did that search start for you?
because when you mix a live show, you're stuck to a console, which is never what you want.
Mm.
You obviously cannot bring, and when you in live sound, you want to go for a digital console for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you can't run all your tools in there
Mm.
because I don't have to explain you why, but
Mm-hmm.
there are uh, Avid was very close to a very good console that was good for live and that could accommodate what studio people do, but the whole platform was not reliable.
Mm-hmm.
In these days, I'm on Yamaha
Mm-hmm.
PM series
Mm-hmm.
and Waves LV1,
Mm-hmm.
which is is a fantastic desk, very
Mm-hmm.
powerful,
Mm-hmm.
is super creative. The channel strip looks like Pro Tools. You
Mm-hmm.
just put your chain of plugins and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And but then you are stuck with Waves plugins, which are
Mm.
great, but there are so many VST plugins that for me are important,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to find something to run those Wave VST plugins, and try things, and I ended up using Gig Performer. We because of few reasons, mainly because of stability and latency performance, basically.
Yeah. So it's your kind of like your thought process as I'm like listening to you talk is very holistic. You're wanting to have, studio level control, studio quality tools behind a live mixing board. Is that correct?
That's exactly what I try to achieve. Every when I mix a show, I mix a record. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I work.
Mm-hmm.
And in my desk, I have snapshots for every song,
Mm.
and every song will be a completely different mix.
Wow.
Some people will say, yeah, but in this way you don't have continuity. It's not true. I have a great continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Every song sounds like it should sound. Close to the
Right.
record or better than the record, because I've had artists telling me, I wish the record sounded like that.
Wow.
And uh, um, in these days you have the tools, you can do it.
Yeah.
You have massive technology on stage. You have great musicians. You must have also the luck of having a great artist performing, because that makes a big difference too.
Sure.
But fortunately I mix good artists, and they what comes from the stage is already good enough.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So yeah, it's so fascinating. So it's like so much is possible. You're having a VST host now. So what is your configuration with Gig Performer currently?
uh, as we spoke about this earlier,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a power user
Yeah.
with Gig Performer. And if you look at my session, is
Mm-hmm.
pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
I run 3 to 6, 7 plugins at a time, not more than that,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is on a single page. I don't use any automation,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I already have enough automation in the desk. So I tend to use Gig Performer for the key plugins, that are on the stereo bus. And for example, there are a couple of reverbs that I want to have absolutely all the time with me, which are the Rev A from Relab Development, some plugin alliance effects because of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's how I use it. So
Mm-hmm.
the Gig Performer is simply used as a simple host. I love the fact that I need to connect the plugin using the little cable.
Mm-hmm.
That brings me to the old days of the patch bay,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
I stay on the same page for the whole show. Everything is there for me to check.
Mm-hmm.
I might do small changes. Maybe I will
Mm-hmm.
change the length of the reverb on vocals, but that's it really. I
And
don't
you
use
do
it
it manually. You go in and you.
manually.
Wow.
No, I'm, you know, I run everything at minimum latency.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend not to touch the computer during the show, because the last thing I want is to get crackles because the machine is not performing well.
Yep.
It can happen with any programs
Mm-hmm.
when you run them, when you push them to the limit.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I use Gig Performer is that because it doesn't do anything unexpected
Yep.
during the show. At the level I work, I cannot afford to have any problem during the show.
Yep. Yep. We got a question coming in from Dave Bolden who wants to know, does your process differ if you're working on a one-off show rather than a tour?
It's not. Well, there is a reason. First of all, I don't do one-off shows because they just simply don't call me for a one-off show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if I have to do a one-off show, I will use the same tools all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
will always bring my laptops and run my external plugins
Mm-hmm.
into the desk,
Mm-hmm.
or have always priority on a console choice,
Mm-hmm.
because I need my tools. I need my tools to deliver. I'm not one of those engineers that jump from a desk to another. In fact, I personally find myself very limited for a few reasons. First of all, because I don't use digicos, and that has created some problems, because I've been offered jobs that were on Digico that I couldn't do,
Mm-hmm.
or most of my friends know I don't use Digico, so they don't even call me if a
Mm-hmm.
job comes up where there is a Digico. But
Mm-hmm.
I stick to that's because I stick to what I use and what I do, because that is what I deliver. And
Mm-hmm.
if I start using consoles which are creating, they are difficult to use for me, then it will affect my
Right.
sound as well.
Yeah. So we talked about this, Dave. By the way, that's a great question. Thank you for writing that in. We talked about this a bit earlier, but like the tool is only as good as a person's ability to manage the tool well, right? Or it kind of feels like that's where you're at, where you're like, if I'm using this set of tools, then I will deliver an excellent result. So I only use the tools that will allow me to perform at the level and quality that I want to perform at. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. You need to know your tools, and you need to be able to get 100% from them, and
Yep. Yep.
it's there is a certain level of experiments you can do, and it doesn't I don't see the reason of changing EQ, uh, you know 5 times in a year, just because you want to try everything.
Mm-hmm.
Eh, it can be a tiring thing,
Sure.
keep trying to keep following the market, because there is so much stuff being released every day that
Mm-hmm.
you can get lost.
Yep.
You really need to be able to make a selection of in terms of tools.
Yep. Yep. What? So you say you have a plugin chain of 3 to 6 plugins. Are you? First of all, I don't even know if I asked you this before. Can we talk through them? And do you have the ability to pull them up on your screen? Like, are they tools that are on this computer?
I have prepared a couple of pictures.
Okay. Cool.
It's actually fun for me also to see. Okay, I will share this tab.
Oh,
Let me
nice.
know if you
Okay.
can see that.
Yep. That's
Okay,
beautiful.
that's a classic. That's my basic setup, shall we say?
Okay.
Shall we call it?
Okay. Great.
Um, you can see Gig Performer on top, and
Yep.
you can see. Okay, let me see what I was using here. I hope that zooming. Yes, of course. I was using um, Masterdesk, the compressor for Plugin Alliance, and the F6. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's on the stereo bus. What you see here
Okay.
is the stereo bus,
Mm-hmm.
and all the others are effects. Um, I will show you on another tab where you can see.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see the new
It's a
tab?
it's a great picture. Yep. I can see it.
Yeah. So yeah, you can see here the master desk
Mm-hmm.
and the F6 on the stereo bus in action,
Mm-hmm.
and all the rest you can see the Rev A in purple,
Mm-hmm.
which is always my go-to reverb for vocals.
Okay.
Uh, the one above, I don't recognize it now. That's funny, but I don't recognize it. I don't know what I was doing. I was I can't recognize that plugin, but that's 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these other two are plugins for special effects. This is a Tom Jones show,
Okay.
and these other two plugins are vocal effects on a couple of songs where we need very dramatic delays.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Very dramatic delays.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see
Mm-hmm.
if I can see. Oh, that's another
Yeah.
still on Yamaha. Yeah, here you can see the Smart EQ Live from
Mm-hmm.
Sonible. I don't know if you know this plugin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is um is an incredible plugin because it does basically you set the shape of your sound, and it will in real time adapt your EQ mix
Wow.
to match that.
Wow.
And it's a plugin that works at low latency. It works incredibly good, but it's a very dangerous tool. You need to go easy with it. And I tell you, for example, where it does help a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Tom has a great mic technique,
Yeah.
but between the songs where he tends to where he does the introduction for the songs, he will be very far from the mic, and the people want to hear his stories. So you always find yourself boosting the low mid or pushing the level, and that sometimes can be, is time consuming because you have to prepare for the next song.
Yep.
That plugin, for example, does that automatically. It's incredible. Between the songs, it will automatically boost all the when he's speaking the low
Wow.
mid and bring the sound in phase again. um, or is very helpful, when you have a very harsh sounding PAs. It can happen,
Mm-hmm.
and
Are
it
you
will help.
you said there's like a danger to using it. What would be the danger? Like what do you have to be careful it will do?
Well, you have to be careful because uh, it will tend to flatten the the frequency response of your mix.
Mm.
So it's like having someone mastering your show continuously.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And in certain songs you want to have more low end, or more top, or more top end,
Mm-hmm.
and this plugin will tend to smooth that. So
I see.
you need to use it with care.
I see.
uh,
And that goes on your
and
master.
that goes on your master. It is
Okay.
a very low latency EQ. So, and even if you don't use the automation, the self-balancing EQ,
Mm-hmm.
it uh, it is a fantastic stereo bass EQ. It is super smooth, and it does make the whole bass nicer.
Yeah.
Is great.
Yeah.
You start the show in the first two songs, you balance the show, you set your EQ on that plugin on the master bass, and you are good to go until the end of the show.
Yep. Yep. So your master bus has your compressor, the smart EQ, but you had a couple of other signal paths, which I'm assuming eventually get fed back into the board before they go out. Is that true?
Yeah, they are effects. They
Mm-hmm.
are effects.
Okay.
The type of consoles I use uh, give me, the Yamaha, they have their own plugins. If not, I will have an insert some waves. uh, I try to limit what I do on the stereo bass because
Mm-hmm.
of latency reasons.
I see.
And
And how low? So okay. So you mentioned the Reve plugin was
yes,
what you like for vocals.
yes.
So the vocal comes into the board. I'm assuming it gets sent into Gig Performer and then it comes back into the board before it goes out. Is that correct?
Yeah, the effects are on a send return.
Gotcha.
They are used on a send return way. They are never in insert on the channel. I don't do that. I'm
Gotcha.
very, in that sense, I'm old school.
Yep.
I see people putting reverb. When I see people putting reverbs in insert on a channel, I go crazy. I go
Okay.
crazy. I'm
What
like,
what
what
do
are you
you
doing?
think? Well, that's how I was always taught to do reverb, unless you're building a synthesizer. But anyway, what do you feel like the send and return gives you that you don't get as an insert?
Well, first of all, you can use the same effect for other things,
Yep.
and and then it's all about the latency.
Mhm.
Reverbs will have a lot of latency,
Mhm.
especially if they are good quality reverbs.
Mhm.
In a live environment, if I have them in a send and return, I can also set the computer to a higher latency setting,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that the computer is not being stressed,
Mhm.
and that won't change much on a vocal reverb. Actually, it's like adding some pre-delay. But at the same time, it's more of a cultural thing for me.
Mhm.
Reverbs effects are on a send,
Mhm.
never on an insert, unless you have to do something creative. If you have to do something creative, is acceptable to have a reverb on as an insert on the channel. But I always find it like a waste of DSP. Uh, that is in a live environment, it will add a lot of latency to the
Yep.
desk.
And
And if
how
you are not,
low? Sorry. Go ahead and finish that thought.
no, that was everything. It's the
Okay.
latency.
How
It's a matter.
low do you have to go? So, like, when you're just like thinking in terms of numbers, like, if you're in a very large space, you're playing a massive show. How low does the latency need to be in order for something to be usable?
If when I have to use 128 buffer,
Hmm.
I'm already not happy.
Okay.
I already feel I must be sure that I'm in a big space, and I must be sure that there is no interference between the PA and the stage, because it's not only the fact that you will hear a snare. You will, if you're in a theater and you have a lot of latency on the stereo bus, you will hear the dry sound coming from the stage, and the PA comes 10, 15 milliseconds after that. Is awful.
Hmm.
It sounds awful. But when you are in a stadium, in a big space outdoor, what you really have to worry is that the people on stage won't be affected by the delay from
Mm,
the PA.
gotcha.
But any buffer above 128 for me is no go.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it means I won't use that. I won't use that chain because I don't find it right.
Yeah.
And so I'm flexible. Every show is different, and I treat sometimes I do adapt my chain on the stereo bus
Hmm.
uh, depending on the situation, depending where I am, and if I really need that plugin on the stereo bus.
Hmm.
Um, I also change this on a daily basis.
Gotcha. And you mentioned too, like, what is it that you love about the Reve plugin? Like, why is that the one that you pick for vocals?
Is the density, is the space and the density.
Hmm.
It's I how I judge the quality of a PA
Hmm.
is very funny, because I don't really listen to the frequency response, because on a line array the frequency response is good, and then you move of 5 meters and it's a completely different story.
Hmm.
But if I have all the effects return on a single fader, and if I push that fader to 0 and I hear the reverbs correctly, then the PA is good.
Interesting.
If I don't hear the effects, or I hear something strange, that is a sign that there is too much processing in the PA, and that is a constant happening. For example, when I use DMB, there is so much processing that all my effects are all over the place.
Yep.
I always have to add more reverb, or is it does change the processing on the DMB, does change my mix.
Yep.
I'm not saying that it sounds bad, but
Hmm.
it does something to the sound which is done only by that system.
Interesting. Interesting. So 128 samples. That's kind of your thing, but you're always tailoring things to the room. That makes a ton of sense to me. So
Yes.
was it just gig performer's ability to get pretty low latency with stability? Like you mentioned, you found gig performer by searching. So what made you
Yes.
like pull the trigger and be like, I am gonna try gig performer? This is like a high pressure situation, right? Like you can't use something that's not going to work because that's a massive problem for your job.
For example, before being on Gig Performer, I was on Live Professor, and I never, I it didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Also the graphically, the way the program is, I was never happy, and I switched to Gig Performer purely because I found it on, at the time you were working with Plugin Alliance,
Mm-hmm.
and I just wanted to try it, and I set it up, and I used it on my show, and it went great. And then I kept using it because
Mm-hmm.
I was what I want. I start my working day, I turn on the computer,
Mm-hmm.
I open all the programs I need to open, and they have to work straight away. And with Gig Performer, that was what's happening.
Yep.
In
Yep.
this summer tour, I've been using another program called VST Rack from Yamaha. It comes with a small Dante interface. It's very convenient if you use Yamaha or a Dante, if you are in a Dante environment. And it's a little interface that works great. The program is still a little bit buggy, but it seems promising. So that has been a program used together with Gig Performer.
I've got another question coming in. Facebook has a permissions thing, so we don't know who asked this question, but a Facebook user wants to know how much time you spend on a sound check setup before the show.
This year, we have done 70 concerts with Tom Jones. I think we have done 2 sound checks.
2?
Yeah.
Is that because
you will never
rehearse?
you will never in 15 years I've been mixing him. He has been sound checking twice. The first time was in front of the Queen. He came and did oh, that was it.
Wow.
Well, the band they don't bother to sound check. I just ran the session of the previous show on Pro Tools, virtual sound check, tune the PA. In half an hour, we are always happy. The main job is tuning the PA, which is, that's where you spend your time, making sure the PA sounds good, play some stuff, and then play 3-4 songs using virtual sound check, and that's it. And then you go for the show.
Wow. So you do the sound check with a sample from a previous concert. You make sure they sound good as they were. Yeah. See, I love that because you're like going in and like the musicians are going to play their instruments, which will make a sound that, it's not going to change very much, but you're in a completely different place. It's going to sound totally different, right? You have to like do the work of getting everything in. So they pass the sound check off to you. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Exactly.
All right. I got another question.
I like that because every time you get a band for sound check, that happens with every band. Okay, they do sound check, they come on stage, they won't play in the same way they will play during the show. The singer won't sing. The sound check in these days is something for the musicians to feel better. For the technicians, we don't really need it anymore. If you are in a touring situation, because we put the mic in the same position every day, we use the same instruments every day. We just test and check anything that is different from the previous show. But is in these days, with the current technology, you can do it, and it does work very well. Virtual sound check is a fantastic feature.
Got another question coming in from J. Pedro Music. When processing the stereo bus on Gig Performer, do you use that as a digital insert on the desk's master out, or do you route that to a different channel and then send that channel to the desk's master out?
Is an insert on the master bus.
Okay.
Is an insert on the master bus. So that will then feed the matrix for the PA. The different matrix used to send the sound to the PA, subs, front fields, whatever. But yeah, it's gonna be a digital insert. I don't do analog insert, and I'm totally against using analog gear in a live environment.
Wow.
I don't see the reason.
Tell me more about that.
Well, that's another thing. When you're used to work in a studio, you can check things. You can do A and B comparison, and I love doing A/B comparison. And I have my studio. I have a lot of hardware. For example, the SSL channel strip. I have analog SSL channel strip, and if I do an analog insert in Pro Tools with an SSL channel strip, and then I open on another channel the plugin, and you close your eyes, you will always choose the plugin. because yes, analog sounds great, but the moment you have to do two conversions to do an insert, you are adding latency, phase shifts, and you have the quality of the converters in the middle, the quality of the preamp, the line amplifier, and that will always degrade the signal path. No, I'm ready to check this with everyone. I've done this test many times,
Yeah.
and the winner has always been stay digital. If you are in a digital environment, stay digital. If you are working in an analog environment, stay analog. But the moment you go digital, stay digital. That for me is a law. I will never do an analog insert, and I feel also when I have to use in certain situation they will have analog inputs for the PA.
Yeah.
I feel very bad when I have to use the analog converter on the desk to run a PA. I feel very bad. If I hear ghosts, I hear I hear the converters.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. I never would have thought about it from that perspective. And in my realm, like working in Gig Performer, I'm like, I want to just stay inside of Gig Performer for the sheer like seamless experience of the whole thing. But it is interesting to hear. So we're coming.
There are great engineers that they do incredible mixes, using analog gear. Muse is an example. He does what's his name, Mark Carolan. He does use a lot of analog gear.
Mm-hmm.
The show sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
But I always tell myself, what if the show was fully digital? How would it sound?
Oh wow.
We
Yeah, you
don't
make
know
a
that,
good point. You make a good
Yeah.
point. I love it. So I have a final question for you for me, but for everybody who's watching right now, we're coming close to the end of our time. So if you have any questions for Matteo about Gig Performer or about running sound in general, yeah, please put that in the comments. We'll make sure to get him answering those things. So I guess I actually have two more questions for you, Matteo. The first one is, when you're choosing tools, what's your process for selecting what you allow into your live performance setup versus what you don't allow?
It's all about the quality. If it's all about the quality, checking them, and in the plugins world, the graphic interface is very important. But sometimes people are overwhelmed by the way a plugin looks, and they will always choose the better looking plugins. I personally close my eyes and listen when I try a plugin and when I change the parameters, because it's very easy to be fooled by meters, colors. There is this incredible plugin that Plugin Alliance have released, the Kirchhoff EQ, which is it has any type of EQ. It doesn't look very good. But the sound is fantastic. And I always try to be very careful, and not to be fooled by the graphic interface. It's so easy.
And do you, so you say you close your eyes, do you like A/B against something else that you know is high quality?
I A/B all the time.
Okay.
A/B all the time.
Okay.
Even the SSL compressor. There are 20 different SSL compressors. I A and B them all the time. And for example, fortunately, the digital the SSL compressor just released by SSL itself sounds fantastic.
Wow.
Sounds fantastic. And I'm using it. I've started using it this year. It has replaced the Waves one. It sounds fantastic, and also the graphic interface behaves in a way that is more familiar to me. So I have switched, but I have compared them. I've kept them for a good 20 minutes, switching, changing parameters, and then I have decided that that one is becoming my go-to
Wow.
SSL
So
compressor.
yeah, and you try and just evaluate based on quality, which I think makes a ton of sense. All right, we got two Facebook one from YouTube, one from Facebook. Dave is writing in, do you map hardware controllers to Gig Performer for switching or parameter tweaks, or do you operate it with a mouse or touch screen?
No, as I said before, I keep it very easy. No automation,
Mm-hmm.
nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Is purely a box to
Mm-hmm.
run the plugins.
Mm-hmm.
I I do a lot of work in the console,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always scared to get lost in controllers, buttons. I have enough things to think during the
Mm-hmm.
show. Uh, so during the show, everything for me is set so that I have to focus on the faders and
Mm-hmm.
the levels.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to change anything else. I
Mm-hmm.
need to be focused on the show, on how it sounds, and the only changes I will do are corrections on the stereo to adapt the EQ,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. And follow the levels.
Mm-hmm.
That's
You
where I'm focusing.
mentioned earlier, occasionally you adjust your reverb. Um, is that done with a mouse when you do that, or are you running it on a Windows touchscreen?
It depends. If
Uh-huh.
the reverb is on a touchscreen, I will use the touchscreen. If
Mm-hmm.
in Gig Performer is mouse, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
I use anything waves, it's gonna be touchscreen.
Yep.
But touchscreen. I'm an avid user of the LV1. The
Mm-hmm.
LV1 is uh, I've done a lot of show this year on the world LV1, but I'm still not completely sold with the touchscreen. There
Mm-hmm.
are certain situations where I don't feel very safe touching a
Yeah.
screen.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's understandable. We have another question from Glenn. Do you label your USB cords? I'm wondering if he's talking about USB cords or if he's talking about just cables in general. As to
I
which
Probably
port?
if I plug them in the same port, yeah, I do that.
Mm.
That's a good question. Yeah, I do that because I have a lot of computers, and you know how computers are.
Mm-hmm.
One day they work, the day after they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Mac. Mac, they
Mm-hmm.
go wrong, and you don't understand why.
Mm-hmm.
While PC are more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I tend to keep the same device into the same USB port all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you do that by labeling your.
I don't label because my setup is set the first time I start a tour,
Yeah.
and then I don't. Yeah, I do label important things, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm
But
not.
you're not concerned about
I'm
like
not
the.
that person. I'm not that person. If someone has to work with my setup, it's gonna be a problem. I will have to explain a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
Everything is very customized. Everything is very done in the way I like to do things, and it's always a problem for me to find the depths. If I don't have to do a show for some reason, there are very few people that can jump on my sessions and work straight away. Because I customize things in the way I do things. And is
Yep.
probably not a very common way of doing things.
Yep. Yep. So you're not concerned about the cable being the same. It's just the same port to the same port.
No, 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 no. I'm very concerned about the cables.
Oh, okay.
I give a lot of importance on cabling. I spend a lot of money in cables, good quality cables,
Mm-hmm.
no matter if they are audio or computer.
Mm-hmm. Do you
Is
have a favorite USB cable? What do
No,
you buy?
I
You
just
don't.
buy something that doesn't break.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I try to avoid the cheap stuff,
Yep.
and I don't have a brand really, but
Mm-hmm.
I have so much stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you feel when a cable is good and when it's not.
Yep.
You feel it immediately, but by
Yep.
touching it, even by looking at it.
Yep. Yeah, I had an issue with an interface that I was running, and I swapped it out for an Anchor USB cable, and it just works normal now. you, a simple cable swap really did it. All right, so I guess my final question for you is like, if somebody was just getting started with Gig Performer, what would you tell them to do?
Well, like with everything, first of all, try to understand what you really need it for, and use it for what you need it. Don't waste your time in endless functions that will be in every piece of software. Focus on what you need and what you need to do with it,
Yes.
and get the best out of it. I personally, I can use 25% of Gig Performer.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
are functions which they are surely very incredibly useful, but that I don't use. Like the recording feature is great, is a
Mm-hmm.
great idea, but I don't use it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know how to run
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just focus and don't waste time, with what you don't need.
It's so funny to me. I love when I ask this question because every time I'm talking to somebody who's working on a really high level, they give me the same answer, which is some version of what you just said. Um,
Well, it's
um,
also true that when you are young, you like to waste your time in trying things. When you are, after 30 years, you do this, you get tired, and you just want something that works, and
yeah,
that
yeah.
works every time. That's
Uh,
very important. Very important.
Dave Bolden just wrote in, never let anyone else wind up your cables.
Absolutely. I know a few very dangerous people. We can't name them, but
Whew.
they will
um,
break a cable just by looking at it.
that's um, I remember the first time I wound a cable in a professional situation. The man who was running sound lost his mind, and was like, "No, no, no! You have to, no, 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 no!" Like not even like coherent sentences, just like blabbering. And that was the day that I learned how to wind a cable. Um, anyway, wild stuff.
It's
Well,
an art.
Matteo,
It's an art.
thank you so much. If people are trying to get in touch with you, like professional purposes, what's the easiest way to contact you?
Well, I'm not very. I don't use social media much, but I have my website
Mm-hmm,
for more professional inquiries.
mm-hmm,
If
mm-hmm,
not, Instagram or Facebook,
mm-hmm.
or I'm quite easy to reach.
Awesome.
It's not difficult. Absolutely.
So we have all of those links for you in the description. So if you're looking to work with Matteo professionally, probably FOMO London Studios is the easiest contact form for that.
Yeah.
And then other than that, these other resources. Matteo, it's been so awesome to chat with you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time.
Thanks to you, because if there is one thing I love is to talk about gear I like,
Yeah,
and it was, when you contacted me, I was so happy because I've been using happily this program for a
awesome.
long time now, and I will continue doing so.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to hear what you think about the next release. Friends, thank you so much for being with us. We'll be back again in a few weeks. We've got a couple of really cool episodes lined up. So we'll see you next Thursday. Not next Thursday, in a couple of weeks. I think it's 3 weeks. We're back, and then we're back pretty regularly. So, all right, friends, have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Thanks again to Matteo, and we'll see you all
Thank you
next
very
time.
much.